So let me share a little slide presentation with you. So let's make sure this comes up here. All right. Okay. So myofascial lines. So this is actually super duper cool, and it won't be as cool to you guys as it is to me because you kind of went to school with understanding about fascia. But you have to understand that just in this world, just 25 years ago or 30 years ago when I went to massage school, we didn't know anything about fascia. And I don't just mean massage therapists didn't know about fascia. Doctors didn't know about fascia. Sports physiologists didn't know about fascia. Obviously, people had seen the stuff in the body. There's like, oh, there's this gristle. But they didn't realize that there was this super pervasive web of stretchy, strong material that had nerve sensors in it that tied everything to your body. That's number one. The other thing is they honestly thought when it came to structural stuff, they really did believe that you had like your foot with the talus on it, with your tibia on top of that, with your femur on top of that. That seems to make sense if you look at a skeleton. But what they started to figure out is, of course those bones are on top of each other, we get that. But they really thought we were built like a house, just like a house, brick on brick on brick on brick. And what they discovered over time, because we don't know that much about the body, that's what's really exciting about this. So doctors and sports physiologists and kinesiologists started to discover that this model that they thought of how the body works, and that, hey, since the femur kind of impacts on the tibia, well, of course you got some cartilage in there, that pads it. Well, that's true. But what they started to realize was in no way does that explain how a human being can walk around for 50 to 100 years and bang their knees together or run a marathon. And that this model of stuff being stacked on top of each other wasn't exactly accurate. That in a very real way, you are suspended by these opposing forces of fascia. You are suspended by these opposing forces of fascia, which I hope I have a slide of, so that your bones don't hit one another. That you are in a fascial matrix. And in a very real way, you are a big fascial matrix first, and then part of that matrix got filled in with different stuff. So some of your fascial matrix got filled in with calcium and potassium, and that became the rigid bones you have that aren't really supposed to hit other bones, but are still fascia. And part of the fascial matrix you had got filled in with muscle, the red stuff you eat, right? Muscle. And at the ends of that muscle are tendons. But the tendons aren't tendons stuck on the end of muscles. The tendons, remember, are absence of muscle because the fascia's everywhere. So, we found out this was the only thing that would explain how people can absorb the impacts they do and run for as long as they do, because this network, by the way, is very spongy and conserves energy, and why their knees didn't actually knock every time they ran. You actually don't want that happening. So, let me see if I, hold on one second. 10 seconds. All right. So, let me show you something very interesting, because this is a little bit hard to envision. All right. So, bear with me here. I want to show you a real quick picture before I get into this about tensegrity, in case it's not in the slideshow. And it will take literally a second to do, because I've got it right here. So, beautiful. All right. Sorry, everybody. A good teacher would have this prepared beforehand. It really was on my thing here. All right, here we go. So let me show you this. Okay, here we go. So there's a concept called tensegrity, which is how fascia holds up your body. And I want to show you this to kind of explain tensegrity. Can you all see this tower in front of you? It's a tower. You can see the buildings behind you. You can see how big those buildings are. Those poles represent your muscles. Are any of the poles directly touching another pole? They're actually all suspended by other poles. So it's a very weird concept. We've suspended something but made it go up. And it's done through what's called tensegrity. And this is how your body is suspended. It is actually the tension in your fascia that allows your bones to kind of give you the rigidity you need and also the flexibility you need without your bones actually hitting bone on bone. And it's very weird because when you look at this tower for a while, you're like, the more you look at it, the more it bothers me. I'm like, I don't understand how we tie. I understand there's metal there, but really it's the floppy wires that hold the tower up in a way, and they should only hold stuff from falling down. Like, they would be good from a crane, but that's not what they did. When you mix rigid and wires together, you can do this very interesting thing called a tensegrity model. And this tower, by the way, is very tall. It flexes, and the bars never hit each other. And that's a tensegrity model. And we believe this is how the human body is, that it works off this same concept. Yes. And to add to that, so this hold on here. Nope, it's not going to do it. I want to show you one other picture here before we move on. Yeah, it's not going to work. Let's see. No, can't do that. Sorry, guys. Hold on. So, sorry for the hold up. Last one, all right. And hold on. What? Any pictures? Sorry, I just lost the pictures I wanted to show you. All right, so let me stop sharing this one. So, I'm here by the way. Questions so far about just this concept of tensegrity while I try to show you this last picture that I'm just dying to show you. But I stored the wrong stuff. All right. No? Good, and last one. Okay. All right. So if you'll bear with me one more time here. So this is an overly simplified model of a tensegrity model of a human being. If it ever pops up for you. Come on. Come on. Come on. Hope it didn't freeze. You can do it there. So that's a tensegrity model of a human being, and believe it or not, none of those bones touch. It's adorable. I know. You all want one. This is Mr. Tapscott. So This is a tensegrity model of your spine. None of those bones actually touch there either. And this is one of the ways we explain how really in some ways your vertebrae are actually hanging off the vertebrae above it instead of smashing down on the vertebrae below it. It's a very hard thing to visualize, but that is the concept. And this is another one. This is a tensegrity model. Look very carefully. None of the hard objects are touching each other. So how do they go up? So tensegrity actually says this very weird concept, which is kind of like a relationship, believe it or not. It needs a little tension to work. And this is true of relationships too. They really do. So we need to be kind to one another, but I need to also have my own boundaries and be able to say, hey, like that affected me, and you can say, hey, back. I hope we have that in this classroom, actually, a little bit of that, right? This loving tension. But that is true in bodies too, so that the bones don't hit. What happens when people's tendons and ligaments get overused and their muscles get tired is then what happens is the bones do hit. The tendons and stuff don't suspend you anymore, and now you really are bone on bone. And after you go bone on bone for a little while, the cartilage rubs away and the hyaline cartilage rubs away, and now you truly have bone on bone. But that's why that happens. So let's go back to the standard slideshow. I apologize for taking so long to get through those things, but I realized that I might not have a tensegrity thing in there. So in advanced kinesiology, the idea is that all your muscles then work in these long patterns. These long chains of action, they call them kinetic chains. You know, it's not just that my bicep works, right? That's how we learned it. We learned our bicep and our anterior deltoid, and we learned all this stuff. But that's not how my body works. My bicep already crosses over two joints. When I go to flex my elbow and flex my shoulder, I quite often involve my bicep because it actually helps both actions, and my body was actually designed to do that. It's why I made such a big deal to you guys about the muscles in each area that cross over two joints, right? So who can tell me the calf muscle, there's actually two, but who can tell me the big calf muscle that crosses over two joints? Good. Miss Mejia, please.
The gastrocnemius and the plantaris.
Yes, gastrocnemius and plantaris. But focus on the gastrocnemius. How many hamstrings cross over two joints? All of them. So, which spinal erector muscle goes all the way from your butt really to your head? Which erector spinae muscle does?
Longest miss.
Thank you, Ms. Sarno. So we believe there's a back fascial line, and I'll explain what that means here in a second. I'll actually show you pictures. A back fascial line of essentially your gastrocnemius linked to your hamstrings. We don't just mean in my head linked, truly linked, physically linked to your hamstrings. And your hamstrings are linked to your thoracolumbar aponeuroses and your longissimus and hooked all the way up to your head. And we believe that this is the way you absorb tension in the back of your body. And we believe this is the reason why somebody can have a neck ache that's tied to their calves. So, let's talk about these kinesiology chains. Remember, it's all fascia. Remember that fascia is a mixture, right, of three fibers. Collagen, which is the steel fibers in this matrix. It is a matrix. It's a living matrix. Collagen, elastin, and ground substance. So ground substance really is a jello, a fascial substance that's in your body that when you get warmer, as you do something, gets more stretchy. And in that jello is fibers of elastin, which are rubber bands. They're not really rubber bands, but they're rubber bands. And collagen, which is not really steel, by the way. It's actually pound for pound stronger than steel. But these are microscopic fibers inside this material, and this material is ubiquitous. It's everywhere in your body. And we know for a fact, I'll show you pictures here in a second, that fiber actually connects all the way from my toes all the way up to my head. And along the way, there are muscles in that fiber, but it's really one long fibrous thing with muscles inserted along the way. Yes, Miss Mejia, please.
What actually is ground substance? What does that mean?
It's what it means is we don't want to explain what it means. Ground substance is a jelly-like substance in your body that is made up of lots of water, and it's made up of other chemicals that allow it to be actually kind of hard and stiff when it's cold, and fairly fluid when it's warm. And so I honestly don't know the chemistry of how it does all that, but if you imagine going home and getting some Jell-O, and in this Jell-O you took a whole bunch of little fine wires and chopped them up and dropped them in the Jell-O, and you cut up a whole bunch of rubber bands and put them in the Jell-O. At the end, when that Jell-O was set up, you'd have this stuff that was like much, much stronger than Jell-O, and it would stretch and kind of snap back, and the wires would help keep it from tearing. I know this wouldn't really work with Jell-O, but you get the idea. And ground substance really is the Jell-O part of your fascia. And they're just trying to explain to us how fascia works. And obviously some areas have more collagen, some areas have more elastin, some areas have, more of both those things and less ground substance, depending on what strength your body wants and things like that. So your fascia changes throughout your body, but that's the basic composition. And what it does is give you a substance that's very elastic, snaps back into place, doesn't tear off. My nose is made out of this stuff, right? And eventually you can tear it off, but the point is, you've got all these substances, is shock absorbing, energy conserving, it bounces back. It does all these incredible things. And it has sensors in it. So it knows when it's being stretched. It can tell you how much it's stretching. It knows what position you're in. It knows when it's receiving pressure on it. And it's living. Of course it's living because it's inside you, but it changes. It literally changes depending on the forces put on it on a regular basis. It will adapt. Your muscle adapts short-term very well. Your fascia adapts long-term very well. It takes a long time to adapt, but once it adapts, it really holds on to those adaptations for a very long time. Sorry, it wasn't the greatest answer on what is ground substance, but. So, yeah, that's enough. Sorry, I don't want to get into it.
Thank you.
Very sweet. So fascia also responds very slowly. So it's why we do myofascial work on people so slowly and so deeply and slowly, because fascia takes a long time to respond. In fact, fascia actually fights hard, quick change. So if you get in a car accident or something, it tries to absorb those kind of explosions. It doesn't try to reshape for that. It actually is more likely to reshape from long, slow movements. Think about stretching, by the way. We all know that when you hold a stretch for a long period of time is when you actually see the most change. And if I sit here and bounce and touch my toes, it doesn't get me anywhere. It just hurts me. I don't get anything out of that, actually. My fascia actually resists bouncing because it thinks I want to bounce. It's there to help me bounce. But if I bend over for a long period of time and let it stretch, it will respond to that, and it will actually grow and be a little bit stretchier in that direction. That's what it does. So, hold on. It has this ability that some massage therapists out there know about called thixotropy or thixotropy, and that means that it will actually change in its composition and how it responds based to temperature. So as you warm up fascia, it tends to be much more malleable, much more pliable. As it gets colder, it tends to be very stiff and hard, which is why we warm up an area of the body before we work it, especially if we're trying to work the fascia, right? And it's why we warm up before an athletic event too. Oh, I did have it. That is the inside of the tower we just looked at. Inside the tensegrity tower. I guess I didn't have to waste all that time. Sorry, guys. And yes, Miss Walker T.
Mr. Chaska, I just wanted to get your point of view on something I had discussed with my externship.
Yeah.
He does a lot of work, obviously, with next issues,
Yeah.
that type of thing. And he had said something that I had never really heard before, and I don't quite understand because I just don't have enough experience in it. But he was not really pro stretching, especially in this situation where, let's say, your fascia is as weird, you have a bunch of adhesions. In his opinion, there's not really a lot of stretching going on. It's more tearing, in which more scarring would happen, and it would just so it doesn't think it would make it any better, but kind of just make it worse over time. Do you have any thoughts on that, of how that would work, or?
Yeah, I've got all sorts of thoughts about it. It's actually fascinating. What a neat guy. So let me first make sure I understand what you said and everybody understands what you said. I think what this guy is saying is when he comes across scar tissue, that he doesn't think he's going to get much stretch out of it. So forget about that. And the only thing he can really do is tear away at it, and that's just going to create new scar tissue. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, he's saying that if you're stretching, so he's not really pro all these stretching things that people do, because if you're stretching if it's adhered and not healthy, and it's not viscous and not moving, like you're dehydrated or whatever, your fascia's not going to stretch, it's just going to tear, which then it has to heal, which creates more scar tissue or create scar tissue.
But what I don't understand, I thought I agree with him, but now I'm not sure I do. What I don't understand is what does he want to do then? If he doesn't want to stretch, what does he want to do?
Well, that's why he works it with all the tools and stuff.
Right, but what is he?
I don't know what the alternative to stretching is.
Yeah.
I never got that from out of them. So that's why I was wondering if what ideas you have about it.
Yeah. Here's the idea. Here's the ideas I have about it. I just want to make sure I'm saying this so you guys can take it with you and it's true.
I'm wondering if you agree with what he says.
No, I don't. And by the way, I talked to the guy. I think he's actually quite bright and brilliant. And so maybe I'm misunderstanding. I think that there are.
What's your take on it?
Yeah, when you're in advanced therapy, everybody, you have kind of two choices when you have a problem come to you. By the way, some of you may discover 20 choices. I don't know. So please don't think that that'll never change. But I can either try to lengthen your fascial tissue, your muscles, everything, whatever, to create more space in that area so blood flow gets in there, so your bones stop hitting against each other, so there's less pressure on the joints, whatever the problem is, so the nerves aren't pinched. And to me, that's all a stretching game. And I don't necessarily mean stretching, touching your toes stretching. It might be me stretching out your tissue. But it's all stretching. And Miss Walker and I are on the same page of that. We're talking about that type of stretching where you're manipulating the tissue. But there is another school of thought that I also agree with too, which is some people have problems because they have scar tissue from injuries, and not necessarily from injuries being struck or whatever, but from injuries where they stretch their fascia and it stuck to something, then it tore there, and then the body builds up more collagen in that area, and it is very hard to break up scar tissue with regular massage. And so then you have a very challenging decision to make, which is, do I want to aggressively attack the scar tissue, break it up, and it will form new scar tissue, but rub it so it forms it in the right direction and it isn't kind of stuck to everything around. And I believe in both those schools of thought. But I definitely prefer stretching when I can. And I'm assuming he is using those tools, Miss Walker, to either aggressively stretch or to break up scar tissue. And I agree with both those things.
Break up
And
That's not the edge of the start anymore.
yeah, and I guess you know what? This is 100% Tapscott opinion. This is not truth, everybody. This is just my truth. I think he's got half the I think he's a brilliant man at half the puzzle. He's going around looking for scar tissue adhesions, and he's breaking them up and freeing them, and the person's got some freedom there, and that is excellent therapy and super useful. But I wouldn't want to forget about the fascial stretching side. I think that can actually make huge differences. It's less invasive, it's less aggressive, and I'm all for that side too. And I think the problem is sometimes when we find something that works, like breaking up scar tissue because it works, you can focus on that and think that's the only therapy. And I think that's a problem with every profession. And right?
Yeah, which is why I like to get like all sides of everything. So there's always a different side, right?
I think so. I think he's overly specialized, and I think he's right about what he's saying.
Do you think it could be that situation where no like stretching would help if there is just a lot of scar tissue in the area that until you get that scar tissue broken down, there's just not much that would fix it?
I think there are situations like that, yes. If the scar tissue is directly pinching on a nerve or covering over a certain place, it's possible that stretching won't help. Because scar tissue, by the way, everybody, is fascia with lots of extra collagen in it, lots of extra steel fibers in it, and so it doesn't respond very well to stuff. It's meant not to tear. Your body said, hey, we had problems here, we're going to overdo it here. And so I could see, yes, the reason he's so right is I think there are some areas where you've got scar tissue in there that it is the problem. And stretching all around there isn't going to fix that. You really want to break that scar tissue free. But if it isn't the problem, if it's just part of the problem, stretching the fascia around it totally helps because you create extra space in there.
Thank you.
So for a blanket approach, I would use the fascial stretching kind of stuff, and then if I found scar tissue along the way, I'd break that up. Like, why not do both? That's just my thought. Yeah. Okay. Tensegrity, but it's about halfway through our thing. Let's take a break, if that's all right, everybody. Tensegrity model, which changes the entire way we see how the human body actually suspends itself. It doesn't stack itself, it suspends itself. And this beautiful, the health of the fascia is what kind of keeps your whole body working together and all this good stuff. So, well, let's see if I can just click through here. So, these are some other tensegrity models just to kind of give you an idea. There's an arch there. I just think they're kind of cool to see. It's amazing. I guess I didn't have to download all those pictures because I've got them all in this slideshow. I don't think I did this presentation for the last class. To be very honest with you, their anatomy wasn't quite as good. Okay. So, that gives a whole new way of looking at how your body is hooked together. It really is this connective tissue network, this tensitional network, this network based on tensegrity. This network based where the bones are meant to be hard, but they're not to be hard smacked on top of other bones. They're meant to be like those poles in that tower. There are, of course, all types of by the way, I apologize. Some of these slides I'm going to skip through because you should know this stuff already. They're just talking about all the different types of connective tissue that you can have, and that we have, sheets of connective tissue and retinaculum and septum, which is the connective tissue usually between sections in your muscle and things like that, and aponeuroses, and the fascia around an entire muscle, which is the muscular envelope, the fascia around a bone, which is periosteum, the fascia of ligaments and tendons and all sorts of other stuff. Just all these forms this connective tissue takes in your body. By the way, remember, what is the most dominant tissue in the body? Connective tissue. It is not muscle. It is not nerves, right? And it's not epithelial. There's only 4 main tissue types. Epithelial is the lining stuff. It's connective tissue. So it's not shocking that we finally discovered this. So it is a network that suspends weight It suspends weight in your body, and it conserves energy, and it distributes stress. And it's meant to be flexible. If you remember that tower is going to really flex without bones ever hitting it. So it has all these properties that you do that are quite amazing. Because while you can go to yoga, Ms. Mejia, you can also rigidly pick up a small child and carry them around. And what I meant by rigidly is you have to be rigid to carry them around. And you can do both those things. And we don't really build structures like that very well. We either build a solid tower or something that's floppy-doppy. But you can choose, which is quite amazing. And we believe that's all due to these fascial connections and tensegrity. So, this is also a model, believe it or not, built highly upon water. Mr. Brown said it. He gave gratitude for water today. Well, it was well said, because not only does water, thank you, Ms. Mejia, not only does water hydrate you and keep your fascia elastic and supple and keep it from tearing. Most people, by the way, when they tear ligaments and tendons, it's during an athletic event when they're dehydrated. Dehydration makes your fascia much more likely to tear. But there's another factor, that there's actually pressure built up inside your fascia. So that ground substance, I said it's jello, but it's kind of jello that's not just suspending the collagen elastin fibers. The collagen elastin fibers are also encapsulating the jello. So there's pressure inside them. There's water pressure inside them, kind of like a water balloon, which is part of what gives it the strength it needs. So pressure in your body is actually a very important thing. Fascia is very, very complex stuff. And we see it in plants. This is a great picture because when you see a droopy plant, it's got a fascial network, by the way. Now, it doesn't have the same fascial network you do. It's got a cellulose-based fascial network, and that's very different. But it's the same concept. And that plant, when it gets filled back with water, it stands up tall again. That's because the balloon pressure, literally the pressure inside the cellulose matrix, which is its fascia matrix, didn't have enough water pressure inside it. And so the plant drooped. So your fascia actually not only gets suppleness and elasticity from water, it gets its strength from water. It's really amazing stuff. So fill her up, yes. I drew all these drawings. Some of my better work. Miss Sardo, please.
I wonder if have someone they get like surgery, how they do with the fascia?
Yeah, so when you get surgery, can they do surgery on fascia, or how does surgery affect fascia?
Yes, how it's surgery going. Sometimes they do the face surgery and make like cut it out to make the beautiful face, or what they do with the.
Yeah. So, Ms. Sarno, it's a really good point. Actually, in surgery, they don't talk to you about it, but in surgery, yeah, they're usually like a facelift, they're actually moving the fascia more than the skin. It's the fascia underneath the skin that holds your face there and makes it taut. Or another example that's kind of interesting, when they cut into somebody's stomach for like maybe to give birth, right, a C-section or something, or a tummy tuck or whatever, it doesn't matter what. They should, a good surgeon, and if they don't, by the way, people sometimes die from this, they're supposed to do 2 sets of stitches. They don't just stitch up the skin like you see in the movie, they stitch up the fascia underneath, and then they stitch up the skin on top. So you're right, when you're doing these surgeries, Ms. Sarno, whether you're trying to make somebody look better or whether you just cut into them, they have to go back and stitch up the fascia. That's the more important stuff. The skin's kind of, your top layer of skin is just kind of sitting on the fascia. It's kind of like fascia, but it's not as strong. So yes, in a facelift, they're pulling back the fascia. The skin is glued to the fascia and the skin comes along for the ride. It's the fascia they're pulling back. And then they actually trim it off, Miss Sarno, and sew it around the ears. And the skin comes with it. And the only problem is that you tend to kind of look like the holes for your eyes and stuff are kind of, yeah. So it's a little bit, yeah. Yes, you get a little bit too much sometimes. But anyway, yes. It's not really a facelift, it's a fascia lift.
And I see in Thailand, they go like cut the fat out from the stomach.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then they
They
have
can, yes, and they take all the fat lie down on the table and show the client. And here they took a lot out from, right now you have perfect body.
Yeah.
And 3 days later or a week, that lady dead.
Oh, yeah, so that there's lots of different things going on there. I don't know if they were getting liposuction where they're sucking the fat out. And liposuction, if they do too much of it, people die. Because liposuction, Miss Mejia will love all these explanations while she's eating. Liposuction actually takes a long metal straw with a sharp razor end on it and slides it on the skin, and you actually go back and forth and scrape the fat cells off and suck them up into a big thing. Well, the problem is you are literally scraping and cutting, and that's a lot of scar tissue and a lot of problems to create there. And if you do too much of it, it's fine for small little areas, but when you start to do a lot and try to remove too much, people kind of internally bleed eventually. And even after liposuction, I've had clients after liposuction that were prescribed massage because they want us to rub the areas so that they heal smooth. Otherwise, all that scar tissue makes it all kind of cottage cheesy in there. Now, there's another type of surgery where they literally cut off the fat. Cut it off, put it there, and sew it back up. And that can be dangerous too, but they do it. I used to have a client that was overweight, but she had a washboard stomach. It was flat. It was flat. And she was saying something one day and commenting about something. I said, well, you could bounce a quarter off those abs. I didn't know she'd had the surgery done. And she said, that's a tummy tuck. And I was like, oh, it makes so much sense. I couldn't figure out why her arms were overweight, her legs are overweight, but her stomach was like, and yes. And then when I worked on her abs one day, she had a huge scar going across there because you can't hide that very well. They try to cut it right at your bikini line, but it's right there, your underwear line. But yes, that's what she had done. And she said they removed a big old roll. Yeah.
And I have one friend, she the stomach tuck.
Yeah.
And she cannot eat a lot, but I don't know what it will cost about the body beneath the whole stomach.
Yeah. I don't.
They just sew it in.
I don't.
They tuck from this stomach, this side, they tuck this small.
Yeah. Now that's an internal surgery where they put they put a band around the stomach to keep them from eating too much. Yeah. I don't judge any of this stuff, and I don't mean like I don't judge it. I really don't judge any of this stuff. I just worry a little bit when you make really big cuts in the body. And I just worry because, it's surgery. People die. Like, we usually try to avoid that stuff. And yes, we've gotten very good at it, but I also worry about cutting through like all the abdominal muscles and things like that. It takes a lot to heal from that stuff. You don't want to cut into your fascial network if you don't have to. So, yes. Yeah.
I just feel like can die anytime.
Yeah. I probably feel better about the facelift than the other stuff because when you're messing with your stomach, you're messing with your core. And that can cause all sorts of problems. Yeah. So, anyway.
And get sick easy.
Yes. Yes. All right. So, hold on. So, the reason you're going to just love this presentation, Miss Mejia, because there's lots of stuff that happens. The reason this guy's arm is breaking off is without your fascial network, we know that things that we take for granted that don't even put that big a stress on our body would snap us in two. Bones aren't that strong alone. I've done this for you guys many times where I jump up and down on my feet and I'm like, why don't my feet break? And they don't break because of this fascial network. And what they're trying to show you with this guy with the wood all over him is that when you do a simple thing like an arm curl, all this tension goes through different areas of your body and gets distributed so that your arm doesn't fall off and things don't break. And you've got very tiny bones in your hands and feet, but they don't break because they're wrapped in fascia. The bones aren't really the reason for your strength. They're just part of the reason. It's really your fascia. Okay. And fascia is meant to be the stuff that actually provides support to everything, including your joints. Your joints are made out of fascia. They have a synovial capsule over the outside of them, and that is fascia. But there's more fascia on top of that to provide extra support to the joints. So really it's the fascia that's around everything that does that. We don't need to talk about end and feel. You guys have already talked about that. End feel, by the way, if you just want to review, really, I'm not going to do it all. I just meant it is the feeling you get when you get to the end of a movement. So we can have many types of end feel. Some is bone on bone, where you've run out of room on that area just to hit there. Like when my arm goes all the way out, that's bone on bone. That is kind of my arm. That's as far as it goes because my olecranon process is actually going into the olecranon fossa there, and that's as far as it goes. There are other types of end feel, like when I bend over to touch my toes. That is a fascial end feel, where it's my fascia stopping me, and it feels kind of like a rubber band. Okay. Let's go on from that a little bit. So why we care about this is people start to make fascial adaptations like this gentleman here. And when they work at a computer for a long period of time, things like that, that's just an obvious one. We actually believe that certain areas of fascia get tight and short. And what's happened is this guy's chest has kind of collapsed in, it's gotten tight and short. And believe it or not, even though his head is forward, it's also kind of back. So this is locked up and gotten tight and short, and his chest has gotten tight and short. And that, because that's fascially connected, you actually have to stretch all that back out to get this person in good posture. We don't have to go into any of this. You guys have gone through PNF stretching with us and Mr. Ibarra, but one of the things PNF stretching really does, when he was talking about the Golgi tendon complexes, what are those located in? The fascia. It's really your fascia that tells you, hey, you're stretching too far and you're going to tear. And that's often what we're resetting. Oh, by the way, we are trying to get people back to center of gravity. Okay. Sorry, some of this is for, people that have gone through all this. Your spine is curved for this reason too, because they don't. Think about it. This kind of proves the fact too. If you built a spine, you'd want to stack the bones evenly on top of each other. If you were trying to have the bones support one another, but we actually don't want that in a spine. We want it curved so the spine has a spring. Your spine is really a couple of bow and arrows going opposite directions to actually spring. That's the idea. It's supposed to spring. We don't want really the weight of the spine going onto each vertebrae below. That's when problems occur. So, joints and ligaments are not designed to support your posture. They can. I can let my head droop and my ligaments will hold it up for a while. But after a while, the fascia starts growing in there and trying to become thicker to help support it, because that stuff wasn't designed to hold it up. Yeah. Long-term postural imbalances create semi-permanent changes in the fascial network. Long-term postural imbalances create semi-permanent changes in the fascial network. And what that means is if I hold my head out here for a really long time like this, eventually my body, it wants to try to hold my head up so it grows extra fascia back there. Well, that's a problem because it's also shortened here, and now I can't get back into good posture. So I come into you and I'm like, my back hurts. And you're like, well, it's probably because your head's out here all the time. But I can't get my head back anymore. So you have to open up my chest. You've actually got to stretch all this fascia here so I can get my head back. And that actually ends up helping my low back. Because your fascia learns. It learns from what you train it to do. And we don't always train it to do the best stuff. Miss Walker T.
Is that kind of what's happening when you get that kind of hump around 7?
100% yes. All the time. That is exactly, they call it a dowager's hump. And it really is that. It really is fascia building up there to try to hold your head and your shoulders because of poor posture for a long time. And by the way, guys, when I say poor posture, I don't mean this person's lazy. That may not be the case at all. But whatever the postural problem is, maybe it's their job, maybe it's they never stood up straight, maybe it's they're emotionally kind of caved in and they've been holding that posture for a long time. It's not that they're lazy. I don't mean it like that. But yes, then the fascia grows up there and they get a big hump in the back. And that's a lot of fascia. Now, by the way, it starts to trap fat and things like that in there too. But that's what it is. It's fascia, yeah. And the older they get, the more they grow there. Mr. Brown.
What's the name of that one?
I've heard it referred to as a dowager's hump.
And is there a way to get rid of that hump?
Yes. So you have to start breaking down the fascia in back, stretching them out. And it's not just in back, you've got to open up their chest and all those kind of things. But yes, you can. Yeah.
And please name one last time, please.
Dowager's hump. I don't know how it's spelled. Otherwise, I would have spelled it for you, to be honest with you. Hold on, I'll tell you, sir. It's, if they still even use that term, but let's see. Okay, sir, it's called Dow, D-O-W-A-G-E-R. Dowager's hump.
Thank you.
No problem, thank you. All right. Boo, boo, boo. All right, where are you guys? There you are. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Brown? We good? Cool. All right, Dowager's hump. And you will see that a lot. So, the other thing that's really fascinating is how your core is built. And we have studied some of this stuff, but we didn't quite tie it together at this level. And this is what's really neat. So in your abdominal region, which remember goes from front to back, because remember you've got abs in back, you've got the quadratus lumborum. Well, you also have myofascial shelves that go across to connect you from front to back too. One of the myofascial shelves that goes all the way around your midsection on the inside and creates a shelf that helps give extra strength to this barrel is your diaphragm. So fasciologists, people that study fascia, say the diaphragm is not just important to breathing, it's actually one of the things that makes my structure strong in here because it ties together all sides of the barrel, kind of like putting a band around the outside of the barrel, although you've got your transverse abdominis to do that as well. And you've got another shelf which is in your pelvic floor, which we haven't really studied at all. But those shelves help to create this barrel, and the barrel, really remember, the barrel can be loose. That's what's awesome in yoga, right? But I can push pressure in it, lock down my shelves, and I can make it very rigid. And I need to be able to do both those things. So there is a fascial network not just on the outside of you, but on the inside of you going on too. It's a beautiful picture of the back stuff. And so you have fascial lines running out on the outside of your body, which I will show you. If we don't get to them today, we'll get to them tomorrow. But you've also got fascial integrity on the inside of you, which is more like these deeper muscles that are the multifidi and the rotatories and the abdominal aponeuroses and transverse aponeuroses. I realize some of that stuff's a little bit outside, but it's also inside you. And it's how you build up this core to your body, this core strength, this multi-layered core. And if you look here, just even this picture, how all of this stuff actually connects on the inside to your to your diaphragm even. It's one of the well, I don't want to put words in people's mouths, but it's one of the reasons that breathing is probably so powerful in some other forms of exercise and such, because the diaphragm is actually a structural muscle too. These are just various types of problems that we talk about. We've already talked about all these, by the way. Look for postural compensations. Because of how fascia works, when somebody's head is forward, their butt has to stick out and back, for example, to balance them. So quite often when a client comes to you with a problem, they're really coming to you with a symptom. And again, your head weighs 8 to 10 pounds until it shifts forward. But these are really great examples. You can see this person who's raising this shoulder. We've all done this, We raise our shoulder to hold our purse or luggage or whatever. Don't be afraid to do that stuff too. But if you do it for 5 years or 10 years, it starts to become ingrained. So don't be worried about wearing high heels. Don't be worried about hiking a baby up on one side of your body. But after a while, it starts to become a habit. And you do it even when you're not carrying that stuff, then it becomes a problem. Or this guy reading here, he's got his head forward. And if you do that for hour after hour after hour, day after day, it starts to become problems. Yeah. And they think a lot of this stuff ties into TMJ as well. We won't get into all that just because. Or wait. So hold on, I want to get to this is about walking. Bear with me, everybody. So you should be able to see some very obvious stuff. We've talked about shortened hip flexors, right? This guy definitely has shortened hip flexors. And he's going to come into you complaining of back pain, right? Because he's holding up his back, but his problem is shortened hip flexors. Tight adductors can cause this type of stuff. The idea is you want your tensegrity model nicely tipped. And look at this picture for a second because it will serve you well later in life. Essentially, when one side shortens, this side has to elongate. And usually, the opposite side then shortens to compensate and get. So if this side shortens, it pulls my head over to my left. Now my abs have to shorten to get my head back to this side. Now my hips try to shorten back on this side. So you get this short, 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 or long, 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 long. Not on both sides, on opposite sides. If your neck is short on the left side, your torso will be short on the right side, and your hips will be short on the left side. And it goes in opposites, just like if my head's out here, my butt's out and back. You tend to do these opposites to try to balance. Just like when you're carrying something, it goes too far this way, you try to bring it back this way. This is your body trying to compensate. Okay, so this leads us to fascial lines. And there are many different fascial lines in the body, but some of the most important, and we're going to go over them, are the back, the front, the side fascial lines. So, this is a beautiful drawing, but it's 100% true that this back fascial line literally connects the plantar fascia, the fascia that goes to the tip of your toes from underneath your feet, to your heel. In fact, your heel is really part of a bow and arrow kind of thing. It's meant to be stretched in a certain way. Your heel is actually meant to be under tension, believe it or not, from your toes and your calves, so that it's pushing in like this and bouncing there. It's not really that the calves just lift up the heel. It's actually bouncing in this fascial string here. Anyway, it goes up to the calf, not all the calves, the calf that crosses over the joint. And I know there's two, but the big calf that crosses over the joint, which is the gastrocnemius. That then feeds into all the hamstrings, right? One head doesn't go across the hip, but the other three heads go into the hip of your gluteal region. There's loads of fascia back there. There's about 57 tendons that we didn't even, ligaments that we didn't even get to in your glutes. And then it goes up through the thoracolumbar aponeuroses, up the longissimus, all that stuff. And it literally goes up and attaches into your head. And it even goes into the frontal, occipital frontalis muscle and the gallia aponeurotica. And it can go all the way up there. So in a very real sense, my head is attached to my toes. And this is very useful normally. It helps me stand up correctly, and it helps me move, and it helps me bounce and do all these things. And that is the back fascial line. The reason it's important is you're going to get clients that you're stuck with. I didn't put that right. You're going to get clients that you are stuck on how to fix them. And you're going to get clients that love you, and they've been coming to you for a month, and they don't seem to be getting better. And yes, part of that Part of that is because they're probably not changing their lifestyle. But part of it is you're like, gosh, you'll get clients that come to you 2 or 3 times a week. And you're like, you're paying me all this money and I feel like you should be improving. And this back problem isn't improving. Well, make sure that you've looked all the way down to their feet. Because fascial problems in the feet, in the calves, in the hamstrings lead to problems in the back and vice versa, all the way up to the neck and up to that. Because we think of those as separate sections because somebody took $4,000 of your money and 9 months of your life and said, what are the 3 calves? What are the 3 hamstrings? What are the 3 gluteals? What? Because I had to teach you something. But unfortunately, I also taught you something very bad. I taught you that somehow the hamstrings are separate from the calves, separate from the gluteals, because we named them. But they are no more separate from those things than Arizona is from Colorado and New Mexico and Utah. They look separate on a map, right? But when you're driving, do they look separate if you're out hiking in the desert or you're like, oh, we just crossed into Colorado? No, you don't realize you're in Colorado till you're way deep in Colorado and all of a sudden it's greener and colder. There's no delineation between the states. There's no dividing line, and there's no dividing line in your body. You know, I'm assuming, this is a little bit far-fetched, but I'm assuming God, when she made you all, did not literally sit there and be like, this shall be the femoral region. No, it's a body. It's all meant to connect somebody up. These are arbitrary things that we divide up. And by the way, a lot of them we divide up this way too because this is how we butcher an animal. I'm not trying to make a big vegan speech here. I just meant like we're used to kind of severing things at certain points, so we're like, this is a leg, right? We eat drumsticks. That's a leg. That's where we cut stuff. But that's not how the body works at all. So the back fascial line is meant to be an entire muscle in a way. If you went, I bet you 20 years from now, I honestly believe 20 years from now, you'll go to school and, well, somebody will go to school, probably won't be us, but massage therapists will go to school, to a very good school like this one, and they'll say, okay, we're going to study the back fascial line. They won't study the muscles. And then they'll say, okay, in this back fascial line, which is essentially this very long tendon that goes from your toe all the way up to your head, there are pockets of contractile tissue in and along that line. So the line's there first, they'll teach you about the line, and they'll say there's a contractile tissue in there that's the gastrocnemius, and then part way up there's the hamstrings. They're inside that tube though. They're inside this bungee cord, there's sections that can contract. They won't actually treat it like separate muscles because they're not separate and they don't work that way. It is one long tendon with areas that can contract and it with specialized tissue that can contract. Remember, the tendons are everywhere. Remember, the tendon in my bicep is here the whole time. It's not attaching my bicep to the end of the muscle. It is the absence of muscle. It's all tendon, and it's filled in areas, that back fascial line is filled in areas with contractile tissue, which is muscle. But we got so excited when we found out about muscle, again, from butchering and things like that, right? What's the stuff that seems to be important to us? The stuff that moves your body and the stuff you can eat. But that's not what's important. That is important, by the way, to making you move still. Muscle's amazing. But that's not what's important to tying you all together. The muscle is meant to be part of the fascia in areas where we need to contract fascia. Because we don't want it to always just be elastic. Sometimes I want to be able to pull my back fascial line back. Sometimes I want to be able to move it, and I need muscle in that back fascial line to do that. But the back fascial line was there first. The muscle is inserted into it. So this is a very common diagram of back fascial line. And just if you ever run out of stuff to do on the back of somebody's body, please connect their head all the way down like this to their feet and hit the plantar fascia. Please hit the plantar fascia. We have very good reason to believe that some of this tension in this back fascial line leads to plantar fasciitis, and we have very good reason to believe that plantar fasciitis leads to problems up the back. Very good reason. Very scientific reason to believe that. Yes, Miss Roughton.
I'm sorry, I've had multiple people talking to me when you weren't going over this. So basically, this is just a fascial line that makes up your posterior region?
Yeah. Yeah, this is the way your body deals with tension and stuff like that. And the most abundant tissue in your body is connective tissue. And there is a line of connective tissue that runs all the way down your back. Now, parts of that line are filled in with contractile tissue, which we call muscle. But this is a line of tension that runs down your body that really is the reason that you're held together. And so what we're saying is you can't, the hamstrings are physically connected. The hamstrings are physically connected to the gastrocnemius, and the gastrocnemius is physically connected to the plantar fascia. And it's physically connected to the spinal erectors that are physically connected. We're saying it's not like the textbooks. We know this for a fact. It's not like the textbooks. The textbooks made it easy and they said this is a bicep. But all this stuff is chained together. And it can't operate on its own, really. I don't mean your brain can't fire off a little section of it, but it's all, you can't fire off your back muscles without having it pull down your entire leg down to your foot. Can't be done. It's all one chain of stuff. Yes, Miss Mejia.
So, fascia is just connective tissue. So, do you think if it was like named like a connective tissue, like this is this fascia, do you think then it would be more like recognized?
Yeah.
Because I think, like you were saying, like ligaments are named.
Right.
And tendons aren't, right?
Right.
Tendons aren't named.
Tendons aren't named, you're right. Well, they are. They're named by the muscle, though, usually. Right? The bicipital tendon. But Miss Mejia, I agree with you, actually. We should call this the back, the back tendon channel. And in that tendon channel along the way, there's some spinal erectors, some hamstrings, some gastrocnemius, some stuff like that inside the tendon channel. It's as though the tendon in certain areas is filled up with muscle, because that's really what's happening. Please don't forget, I know I keep saying this, but I just hope we're really getting it. The bicep doesn't have tendon at the end of it on both ends. It is tendon throughout, and it's stuffed full of extra meat in the middle. That's why it puffs up. But if you just, all the end is just there's no meat in it. So it comes back to just being connective tissue. So this back fascial line is really this large tissue of expanding and contracting lumps of contractile tissue along this back tendon channel. You're right. I think if we change the name of it, it would really help. But the problem is this is actually fairly new stuff, and it's fairly advanced because we couldn't even have this discussion that we're all having right now if you didn't really know your anatomy, your muscular anatomy. And the problem is it's taught that way. I actually wish it was taught this way instead, but it's a little bit early for that still. Yeah, because in a way we're saying, hey, all that stuff was true, but that's for kindergartners. Now we're going to do this other thing, right? It's not for kindergartners, by the way. It's muscular anatomy, advanced muscular anatomy already that you guys have. But the fact is, now we're kind of saying, hey, that's true, but it's actually much more amazing. And you're right, it's tricky. Mr. Riedel.
Yeah, so you're saying that back tension can cause things like plantar fasciitis, right? Okay,
and vice
so
versa.
That's true. Yeah, so if that's true, if you did have plantar fasciitis that was caused by back tension, your back would be pretty messed up, right? Like you would have serious back issues that would go along with that, right?
So wait, I just lost you for a second. So if what now?
Oh, okay. So if you had plantar fasciitis that was caused by back tension, then you would have serious back issues as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, probably, yeah. It's a little hard to tell. Let me explain why. And I can actually visually show you. This is really. So, this is not really complex, and it's actually makes a really good point. If I could undo the tape. All right. So, if we have a long rope, everybody, and we're playing tug-of-war, right? And we've got a 20-foot rope. And let's say Miss Lobitz is at one end of that rope and I'm at the other end. I don't know why, but I need to make a distinction here. So Miss Lobitz, I was a little bit worried she'd beat me in the tug of war, so I gave her a crappy end of rope, and her rope down there is unraveling a little bit. Now, it doesn't matter who pulls hard on that rope, it's going to keep unraveling down by Miss Lobitz, right? Does that make sense? So we've got this very long rope, and tension on that line of rope is making the problem down by Miss Lobitz even worse, right? Even if Miss Lobitz kind of realizes that down there and says, well, I'm going to quit pulling on this, if I keep pulling on the rope, I might as well be right next to her, right? Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I'm sure you can. Good. This is like a long fascial line, right? If there's a tear way down here, if there's a tear, I wonder if I can get a little closer. There we go. If there is a tear way down here, me pulling here is going to make that tear just as bad as me pulling from here or me pulling from here. It doesn't matter. There's a tear down here and this is all connected. So if there's a problem in my plantar fascia and my back is pulling on the back fascial line, it might as well be my plantar fascia pulling on the fascial line, right? If it's all a rope, you can be anywhere along that rope and ruin the weak part of the rope. It does not matter. Does that make sense? That's kind of answering, yes, sir, that's kind of answering your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the back tension would kind of increase the effects of plantar fasciitis then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
If it's in the back fascial line, absolutely it would. The other cool thing is, I missed that, and now I have to see it just because of the facial expressions that mess me in. That's what happened to me on the mechanical. You were the mechanical bull. Oh my gosh. Get over it. Kidding. So yes, exactly. So if there's a problem, if there's a pain along this line, we used to think like, well, a foot pain stays in the foot. But, and by the way, I'm one of those people, so I'm not making fun of you. But think about it. Like, that's so insane. Like, I'm trying to make the foot separate from the body, but what's separate about the foot? It gets its blood from my heart. It gets all its nerve impulses from my brain. It's connected on this fascial line all the way up to my head. It's only separate because we call it a foot. Yes, that's right. So, the cool thing about this is, usually when we have a problem, as smart as we like to think we are, I go to your foot and I'm like, must rub foot. Foot get better. Do, better at the foot. The foot might not be the problem. The problem could be down here. And you wouldn't know the difference. This area can put tension on that just like any area along the way can. So now I've got something to work on. I want to look at the whole back fascial line and see where it might be tight, or Ms. Walker T, where there might be scar adhesions along the back fascial line in this case. Because those adhesions could be holding the fascial line so that the foot can't stretch enough and is causing the problem. So it would make a lot of sense to work that whole thing. Yeah. Peanut gallery. Got the peanut gallery here. All right. Sorry, peanut gallery is a Shakespeare reference. All great Shakespeare plays had kind of an underlying comedy going on in them too, to kind of keep the commoners happy. And that's what's going on here too. Anyway, so that's why this is so interesting, and it's really a hard habit to break, because we're like, well, if I have a problem in my hand, it's got to be my hand, right? But if you come crying to school, do I assume the problem is school? It might be your home. And it might not even be your home. It might have been something before your home. Everything is a chain. And yet we want to chop the body up, the miracle of the human body up, and say, no, it doesn't really count there. And clients don't want to do that either. And other massage therapists don't. This is one of the things that will make you a great massage therapist. Other massage therapists, good massage therapists, not great ones, but there are a lot of good massage therapists out there that when you come to them with a hurt neck, they will massage your neck beautifully. And they're better than most just for doing that. Just because they get in there and they do all the lovely stuff in there and they get down in there. But you guys are going to go, well, this could be a back fascial line problem. I'm going to, at the bare minimum, work up the head and go down to the waist, at the bare minimum. And if this problem persists, I might take it all the way down to the feet. You know, Mr. Barr is always joking me. He's like, you're obsessed with feet. I'm not obsessed with feet. I'm obsessed with their connection to the back and front fascial lines and the side fascial lines. We haven't even gotten to all these yet. So that's the concept, is things aren't separate. And if we have a tug of war, if that rope is 50 feet long, if there's a cut in the rope anywhere, a little unraveling, you can pull anywhere along that rope and equally affect that cut. It doesn't matter. If I tear this tape a little bit, it doesn't matter if I pull on it from right here or way over here. We know what's going to happen. That tape is eventually going to tear here because it's all connected. Fascia. It's fascinating. All right, so that's back fascial line. Might have a picture of it, which would be really cool. I know you think this is a picture of it, but this is just the beginning. There. I put this up there for you, Miss Mejia. Oh, you can't see it. That's why you're shaking your head at me. That makes a whole lot more sense. It's like that was not the reaction I was expecting. So, this is from an actual human body. They actually wanted to prove a point. They wanted to prove that all your muscles are connected. Okay, there are some terms here you're not aware of or familiar with, but what muscle is this down here?
It's in the sewer region, so.
Yeah. So what is this?
Short head of the biceps femoris, so that's the.
Well, what's this down here?
Gastrocnemius.
This is the gastrocnemius. This is the biceps femoris attaching to it right at the knee. These are tendinous attachments, by the way. Tendinous attachments are like steel. This is the semimembranosus and semitendinosus. Here's the short head. That's not part of it. Look at the sciatic nerve. It's going to run down through this whole fascial line. Oh my gosh, talk about sciatica. But wait, Tapscott, sciatica occurs in the bottom. No, it occurs through the back fascial line. Sacrotuberous ligament is a ligament in your butt. That's the anatomical term for it. This is your erector spinae muscles. This is your gallia aponeurotica. This is your gallia aponeurosis up here. It's also called epicranial fascia, which is the same thing, just a different name. For your look how thick this is. This is the stuff coming off the back of your neck. Look how thick it is. Look how thick it ties into your erector spinae. And remember, there are nerves running all the way through here, and all this stuff are really strong tendinous connections. And by the way, this is a dissection. Dissections don't ever go very well. But they're trying to prove a point. These are not separate muscles. They are connected. You can't pull on one without pulling on all of them. That is the actual back fascial line. So when somebody has a problem, oversimplifying, but when somebody has a problem that I really think is in their back fascial line, whether it's plantar fasciitis, or back problems, or neck problems, I'm talking about neck problems and back, or hamstring stuff, or calf stuff, I would hit all of that. A calf problem to me is a hamstring problem to me, is a plantar fasciitis problem to me, is a spinal erector problem to me, is all the neck stuff too. Remember the semispinalis capitis and, semisplenus capitis and all that stuff back there. It's all that kind of going back there. Anyway, that's the superficial back fascial line. The reason they say superficial is you've got some deep stuff too. Yes, Mr. Bladgen.
So concerning the posterior fascial train lines.
Yeah.
Talking about. So if you have an issue in one place, does it tend to travel superiorly or inferiorly, or
I don't
like
know. I don't know. I've seen both, and I don't have a working theory as to why it does one or the other. But you're right. It tends what your body does. Think about it. If your body's having a problem along this line, it tends to try to send the tension out to other areas.
Okay, so I know I've been on this mechanical bull situation all this whole time, but now all this makes sense because the night after that, the back of my ankle was hurting, and my calves were killing me.
Yes.
So then the pain started to travel up, and now it's in my middle back.
Yeah, actually, the mechanical bull is a good example. It really is. But also, this explains some other really cool stuff, everybody. So think about this too. What happens is your body can, and the earth, and your life, and this ties into everything, it can compensate for something by kind of being like, well, yeah, my back's a little jacked up, so I'll distribute some of this tension up to the neck and down to the hamstrings and have them work just a little bit harder. And that works for a while, right? So maybe you're running late for school, well, you'll make up for that by driving faster, right? We compensate by bending, or I stayed late at school, so I'm going to compensate by having somebody else make dinner for me tonight. You're compensating by distributing out stresses to other things available in your network. And the body does the same stuff. And that works for a while. So a lot of times people say, oh my gosh, I bent over this morning to tie my shoes and my back just went out. It didn't go out. It's been having a problem for a very long time, and your body's been distributing this stuff and trying to get other areas to compensate for it. But you keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it, and one day it's too much. And we see this in systems in nature all over the place. Nature can absorb a certain amount of craziness for a while, and then it maxes out. And once you've filled up the buffers, boom, big problems happen. Not to get on a whole save the planet high horse, but this is one of the fears about global warming that people don't realize. There are natural things that help keep CO2 levels at their normal base, but those things have limits. And one of the fears is that once you reach those limits, then things just go out of control very quickly, like your back going out. Once you reach the limits of a system, all of a sudden it doesn't just go up like this, it goes this. And that's what happens in the human body too. But yes, it's very much like the mechanical bull thing, Mr. Blygen. It's why maybe the whiplash from your mechanical bull literally hurt your ankle. Or something in your ankle led to that filling up there. Or you felt this chain go up the whole thing. Maybe you hurt one area and the rest of the chain's trying to compensate for it. Very, very much so. Back fascial line. So the cool thing is, even if you forget some of this stuff, you've now got a whole chain of things to look for. Plus, what if this chain just needs to be a little bit longer? I can't sit there and just rub one spot for 2 hours because eventually it bleeds and bruises and the body kind of fights back and it actually builds up more fascia there and it doesn't really make a lot of difference. But if I've got a chain of 75 things and I make this little spot just a little bit looser, this little spot a little bit looser, all 75 of these spots a little bit looser, what happens to the chain? If I go to a railroad train, if you've ever watched a railroad train go by, there's like sometimes 300 cars. If I made each of those cars just an inch longer, you've got 300 inches at the end. 300 inches is like 8 feet or something. No, my gosh, not even close to that. 300 inches is way more than that. I'm way off there, sorry. Couldn't do the calculation quick enough in my head. But you've got all this space at the end, you've got a whole other railroad car. Well, you can do that with the back fascial line. You can work the whole thing, not even know where the problem is, and because you've created just a little bit of benefit in the plantar fascia, the gastrocnemius, the hamstrings, deep, deep inside the glutes, the spinal erectors, the neck, and the galea apnerotica, all of a sudden, that was enough to relieve pressure on whatever area was causing problems to begin with, and everything's better. Because you can't just open up one area and just fix it. Bodies aren't like buttons. So that's the other beauty of these fascial lines. Cool? All right. How are we doing? Okay, okay, all right. You got a double thumbs up. It's almost like a double wave. It's pretty impressive. And what they've done here is put this on a human body, on a skeleton like from my classroom. So the cadaver they used was taller than the skeleton, so they had a hard time laying it on there. Can you see, by the way, I don't get the humor, but can you see, by the way, why it's important when you're at the knees? Yes, we don't rub the popliteal region directly in the knee pit, but we definitely want to get on the sides around, I like calling it the knee pit. We get on the sides around it because that's where the fascial connections are. And you guys might do that in this class, but I got to tell you, 99% of massage therapists don't do that. 99% of massage therapists don't rub all the way until they hit the hips with the hamstrings, so they're never getting the fascial connections up there. 90% of massage therapists don't go all the way down to the sacrum when they're working the back. So, 80% of massage therapists rub the feet like they're just trying to apply lotion to them. Makes me want to smack them. They're not getting into the fascia and stretching it out. Does this sign of PNF stretching? Absolutely. Could you use PNF stretching on each of these areas to loosen up the whole back fascial line? Yes, you could. Could you massage muscles could you massage all these muscles while you're putting them into a stretch? Could you dorsiflex the foot and massage out the plantar fascia and the calf? Could you flex the leg, the coxal muscle, and rub the hamstrings while they're in a stretch? Yes. Could you? You could. Yes. Is this one of the reasons Thai massage is so effective? Yes, it is. Yeah, I'm sure Thai massage is effective for a whole bunch of other magical, wonderful reasons, but what does Thai massage do? It puts you in a stretch that quite often stretches your back fascial line, and some other ones we're going to learn about, and then it massages those muscles while they're in a stretch. Brilliant! Of course it's brilliant. The Thai people have been doing it for 2,000 years. They know what they're doing. We here in the West invented massage a couple hundred years ago. I'm not sure we invented it. So they've been doing it forever over there. They know exactly what they're doing. Cool. Back fascial line. Do. So what they're trying to tell you here just really quickly, I don't want to beat this into the ground, but just really, really quickly. They're trying to say the reason we didn't know this is every time they show this to you in an anatomy chart, or every time they remove a calf, they cut these connections. They cut this stuff out. Because it makes sense. You got to get this piece of steak off this piece of steak, and they cut it. By the way, do you see the fascial connections between the hamstrings? Because the biceps femoris and the semimembranosus and semitendinosus are glued together up here, if this area is too glued, they can't pull separately on both sides of the knee evenly, and that can cause knee problems. So in advanced massage, we'll often drop an elbow right in here and drag it up between the heads of the biceps femoris and the semimembranosus and semitendinosus to loosen this area up in between here because it would get too fascially connected down in here. You actually don't want it too connected because it's pulling on the sides of the knee unevenly. Because if I'm connected up here, when I pull with this arm, I tend to make this arm pull, and I want them to be able to pull separately. My brain needs to be able to control them. So you can split. You don't really split, by the way, thank God. But you can split up between the hamstrings. It's a very aggressive move. It's very effective. And we do it when people have problems with their knee alignment, because the brain is trying to pull on stuff, but it's pulling on other fascial connections. And so we'll kind of split that up, loosen that stuff up, and let it start to pull on that stuff properly. And just look how thick these fascial connections are. I mean, they're powerful. This is another dissection, just to show you how all this stuff hooks together. Notice, by the way, how they call the plantar fascia the plantar aponeurosis. That's because aponeurosis is sheet-like tendon. So plantar fascia is plantar aponeurosis. Abdominal fascia is abdominal aponeurosis. Gallia aponeurosis is gallia fascia, or epicranial fascia, or epicranial aponeurosis. These are all just words that we can interchange. They're 100% the same. Cool. I love it. Okay. So that is the superficial back fascial line. It is one of the things that gives you bounce in your foot. It's meant to be a little bit tight back here and give you bounce in your foot. So it's not just that your calves lift your foot up, it's that your foot pushes back against the plantar fascia in the calves, that heel does, to give you that natural bounce. It's why we know that plantar fascia is kind of tied into all this. I hope I have a slide of that. Maybe I don't. Hold on. It's just another way to look at fascia here. Fascia, fascia, fascia. Another one. So, when it comes to fascial tensegrity, your fascia is even hooking your bones, this is an actual fascial network, to the layers above it. So things are suspended. This is muscle tissue that they've kind of teased out. Look how much fascia is between it. This is a side cut of a leg, that's the femur. This is all fascia wrapping up sections of that femur. It's everywhere. It's absolutely, and by the way, if they went down with a microscope, you'd see this all over again. There's more of it. It's not just like it's at this level. It's everywhere. And it remembers and it grows. And by the way, this is a bone. Look what's inside the bone. Yeah, it's not just fascia wrapped around. I think people think, oh, there's fascia on the outside of it, periosteum. No, I mean, yes. There's fascia inside it. It's got a fascial network inside it, a spider's web inside that's filled in with bone. But it starts as fascia, which is why when people say, well, how does the tendon connect to the bone? It really is the bone. It's all fascia. It's just filled in with different stuff as we go. Cool. And here's your plantar fascia. It is the start of your back fascial line. It is thick, it is strong, and it goes to the heel. And it's why when I told you guys to massage the foot, that you head towards the heel. You don't always have to do this, but you head towards the heel, and you don't try to run over it at first. You try to run into it, because you are trying to really stimulate this stuff in here. Then you run it over the heel, and then up the back of the leg. An actual foot. I'm sorry. But it's very useful to look at. It's beautiful, too. Look at all this stuff. And by the way, you'll notice that some of the fascia is just running every which way but loose. That's just generally keep stuff together. But where you have high lines of tension, fascia runs in those directions. And if you guys participate in an activity that were to twist your foot all the time, you'd have fascia going different directions because of the twisting. But you don't normally. Your foot normally gets tension on it the same way over and over and over again. And that's these fascial connections. And that's why this is one of the most important ways to look at a foot. These arches are what allow you to bounce along and all that kind of stuff. Tremendous. We're just pointing out how much fascia is really inside this foot before it wraps up. It doesn't actually insert into the heel. It actually goes into the heel, wraps around the heel, and then goes up the ankle. It actually, the plantar fascia becomes the calcaneal tendon, which becomes the gastrocnemius, which becomes the hamstrings, and so on and so forth. So I hope we have this in here. This is showing you, by the way, what is this doing? It's creating a little bow and arrow so this thing can flex up above it. Can flex up above it. Heel spurs often occur when there's too much pull on the bone. So heel spurs can actually be caused by the tension being caused by the fascia. So this is super important. Really what's happening is this is under tension and the heel presses back into this like a bow and arrow. That's actually how you deal with all the tension on your feet, because it's unbelievable the amount of tension you have on your feet. Another great picture. I promise, Miss Mejia, it's not all just dissections here. Boom, we've already seen that. And this is what I meant by a bow and arrow. your heel is actually fitting back into a very stretchy line. What's this? This string right here is your, oh shoot, wrong way, hold on, this is important. This string right here is your gastrocnemius, this is your plantar fascia. And they are meant to have your heel come back into them and then snap back. They're meant to conserve my energy when I bounce. This is how you run. We learned first, right? What? We learned that the gastrocnemius is on the heel and pulls it up. That's true. But it also provides tension for the heel to pull back into this thing that's actually the string of the gastrocnemius, the plantar fascia, and the heel pushing back into it. It is actually a bow and arrow tensegrity model. So that instead of bone hitting bone, it's actually shock absorbing into this fascia of the plantar fascia, the plantar aponeurosis, and the gastrocnemius. And we can see, I hope, why problems in your calves could easily cause problems in the bottom of your foot, and vice versa. And this is why extra weight and stuff like that can lead to plantar fascia. It's not people hitting their foot, it's the amount of the heel pulling back every time this heavier body is under tension, and the body's trying to maintain tensegrity. It's trying to do that. So, you don't have to worry about that too much. Let's see. Again, gastrocnemius going into hamstrings. Boom. I love this hand grabbing thing because this is how your gastrocnemius meets your hamstrings. They overlap, but remember this is a diagram, they're actually intimately connected here. And this is why, by the way, what is one of the actions of the hamstrings? They can flex the tibial femoral joint, your knee, and the gastrocnemius can flex the tibial femoral joint because actually they work together. The book's like, well, that's a secondary action. Not really. Not really. They're designed to work together at this joint properly and pull on it from both sides so that it's actually less stress on the joint. Why would you pull on it from just one side? Why not pull on it from both sides? And that's how they're designed to do that. This is how your body really deals with stuff. Your body is so much more elegant than a book could possibly allude to. We kind of taught you building blocks, but these building blocks go together in an absolutely beautiful fashion. All right. So this is very important. This is why, you guys remember when you were massaging, I'm like, massage all the way up until you hit the bone of the butt? That's because that's where the hamstrings turn into the sacrotuberous ligament and go into the sacrum. If you're leaving this section out up here, that's a problem. So you want to massage them up underneath the glutes till they hit this bone. You can even go through the glutes into the sacrum. You have my permission. Just make sure you have your client's permission. Cool? This is all the fascia, not even all. This isn't even close. This is the fascia that's actually underneath your glutes. This is your hamstrings coming into the sacrotuberous ligament. It goes into your sacrum. It's all hooked into here and starts going up your spine. You can cut this out in life, but there's really ligaments everywhere in this area. Otherwise, your hips would fall apart. They're not that strong. Think about the crazy stuff you do. Some of you will get on a mechanical bull, right, with your little frail little skeletons, and you'll let it bounce you all over the place. And the only reason you can survive is because of all the ligaments and fascia holding your decrepit skeleton together. Thank gosh. Yeah. So that your pelvis doesn't break. All right. And then, of course, we have all the spinal erectors that go up and insert into suboccipitals, all this stuff that goes up in the head. You're very familiar with this. And there's even deep fascia with all the stuff we've learned about before. This is one of the good reasons to put somebody in a stretch when you work their spinal erectors. There are some massage therapists, by the way, some really, really, really good ones that, how did it do that? That work on people basically partially clothed so that they can always have them in a stretch. They're always trying to put them in some kind of thing. They're never working them flat because they're trying to kind of slowly work their fascia to a new location every time. Suboccipitals. Should memorize these, but just a little hint, you should be able to recognize these names and know they are the suboccipitals. He said in a telling manner for people that are going to take a test on Thursday. Okay. And here's the fascial network coming up the head all the way to the top here. We're going to find it can do some other stuff too, by the way. It can actually come up here to the mastoid process, the temporal bone, and go to the front. And we will get to that in the next class, which is the superficial front fascial line, which we can talk about tomorrow. So I hope, if anything, we've left like no longer compartmentalizing the body. We realize that a problem in one area truly is just as bad as a problem in another area, that I really can pull my scalp here and it really can affect my foot. It seems insane, but if you realize it's one long tendon, it's not so crazy. Questions, comments, thoughts? Anything? Nothing? Yes, Ms. Mejia, please.